So Wayne, how's the show going?
Really interesting. As Endico, we've never really done an event like this before. We historically haven't done the large events, but no, today's been very interesting for us. It's something different, as I said, and we've managed to meet some really interesting people. So it's been a good event for us so far.
And DSR, what are sort of the main issues that we're seeing and you're facing?
Yes, so historically the issues with DSR have largely been around people actually recognising us as a market or a suite of products and services. So historically for the last number of years it's been an educational process. The issues that we're seeing today are transitioning to more around complexity and uncertainty. So the educational aspect of what we do as a business is diminishing, but what we're seeing is that people are getting confused as to what demand side response is or what demand management is. There are any number of ways of playing in the market, so that complexity tends to confuse potential clients and customers.
Is that because there's so many different products out there?
Absolutely. So we use the analogy that talking to somebody about demand management or demand side response is akin to talking to somebody about energy efficiency. It can mean so many different things. There are so many different ways of participating in the market that it can be confusing for an end user, as having a conversation with one DSR provider can be very different to another. So that complexity doesn't help the marketplace, and often we spend now much of our time, rather than educating, simplifying what's going on in the market. But I think it's also must be recognised that National Grid have latched onto this as well, and they're going through a rationalisation and simplification process at the moment, and we expect in 2018 National Grid, at least on the revenue side of demand side response, to start to simplify what they do, which will be a great help to everybody.
And what will be the benefits for end users for that?
So I think a clear understanding of where they can participate in market and the value of participation in various different elements of the market will be fantastic for everybody. So at the moment it's very hard to measure whether participation in one particular scheme is going to be more valuable than measurement and participation in another scheme, and that's taking away the fact that often we spend most of our time assessing a client's ability to participate. So once you throw in the technical complexity of participation with the market uncertainty and complexity at the other level, that can be very confusing. So simplifying it from the top down from National Grid, and Endico being able to have a real clarity about an asset's performance and where that places it in scheme will be of great value to everybody.
Are those the main solutions you see to the market, or are there other methods of sorting this market out?
I think National Grid have a big part to play, but 2018 we see as a year of a kind of convergence of traditional demand side response or demand management. So basically most people understand as revenue from National Grid, with being able to participate in some smart tariffing arrangements with suppliers. So we see a convergence of demand side response and electricity supply and tariffing, which is what I'm going to talk about in a few minutes' time, which of course could add more complexity in the market, but what we see is that convergence of demand management and supply side will actually start to clarify things in a consumer's mind. So my supply tariff and my demand management portfolio will suddenly start to merge into the same thing, and then it simply becomes around the decisions I make on a daily or an hourly or a weekly basis as to where I want to participate based on the value I talked about earlier.
It seems quite a large step change for an organisation to make. How far away do you think we are from that?
I think it's a really good question. I think many organisations have already made the change, both large and small. So we work with many large corporate organisations, multinational organisations, but we also work with smaller owner-managed businesses. I think we're at the cusp of that crossing the chasm, as the book might call it. So the early adopters have been played in the marketplace, understood the marketplace, and we still use many of those as case studies and reference points for new customers. But we're now becoming much more mainstream. I think on demand side response at least is becoming much more mainstream. So I don't think it's just the early adopters anymore. What we're seeing is many more inquiries and conversations with the much larger organisations, whether that's in data centres or food production or chemical plants. So yes, we're very much of the opinion that this will become much more mainstream in 2018, both in demand response on its own and in, as I said, the convergence of supply tariffing with demand management.
A lot of the suppliers in the DSR side seem to be heading towards the larger end users. Can you see this filtering down to smaller users?
Yes, I think so. So the issues with smaller users or even residential homes is cost. So and cost of market entry.
Yes.
So what we see is large industrial sites, it's fairly easy to make the business case stack, and you might have a 2 or a 4 or a 6 month payback on those kind of schemes. The complexity involved in turning bits of equipment on and off at different times for different reasons means it's largely been excluded within the SME marketplace and certainly the residential marketplace. We're starting to see some quite innovative projects coming along and trials on small scale, cheap to install offerings in residential and SMEs, and I expect that to pick up a pace. I don't think it will be widespread in 2018, but I think what you'll start to see is some fairly attractive projects on a small scale going on that start to prove the business case and participation. And often in residential and SMEs, it's more around behavioural management than it is about the technology required to deliver it.
And it's very much a technology-driven industry. What new technologies can you see coming through in the next few years?
Well, we see it as a technology-driven industry. Others may not. We see technology as being critical for the speed, both the speed of response that's required to participate across different marketplaces, but also in the decision-making process. So not only which scheme should I participate in, as I mentioned earlier, and what's the next best course of action for me to take as a business or as an SME, but also, do I actually want to participate or can I participate at the moment? So simply installing a piece of kit or using existing controls to turn things on and off is often not enough. So you need that technology layer that sits in the middle with the controls logic and the controls ability that enables you to participate. So we see very much it being technology driven. As I said, I think that the largest innovation in the next 12 months I see is to make that technology cheaper and easier to install. We've recently won a grant from Enterprise Ireland for our R&D plant in Cork, and that will be to facilitate this kind of cheaper installed hardware product that will make the market more accessible to SMEs and residentials.
So where do you see Endeco going over the next few years in terms of market and technology?
So we'll continue to grow in the UK and Ireland. We're starting to incorporate large-scale batteries, behind-the-meter batteries into our portfolio, so we very much see energy storage, electricity storage as a thing of the future. Very much a growing market, and we've got a fairly active pipeline. We'll have our first install capacity in January of 2018, so we'll be live in market with that. So we see very much that as part of our direction. We're also looking at markets in France and the US as part of our international expansion, so we see opportunities growing in other markets that are a little bit behind the UK.
Is the UK well ahead of the rest of Europe?
Yeah, without going into too much detail, the UK and Ireland have particular problems around managing an island grid. So balancing the network is much harder in smaller grids. So Ireland and the UK, Ireland and the GB, have particular issues around fine balancing from frequency response, very fast-acting services. That's not so much the case in mainland Europe and the US for obvious reasons. The network is much bigger and there are more actions to take. But with the advancement of more battery technology, more renewable technology, that starts to impact on the grid in much more real terms, and we see big opportunities in Northern Europe in particular and the US in the next 12 to 18 months.